Hi everyone, I'm Rachelle with Originally Worn, and in this video we're going to go over the basics of how to use chalk paint. I'm going to teach you all about painting, distressing, clear waxing, and using dark wax. If you're brand new to this, watch the video, and in the end, if you still have questions, be sure to comment them below and I'll try to help as much as I can. If you've painted furniture or used chalk paint for years, watch anyway, because you never know what kind of tricks I have up my sleeve. But first, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us online at originallywornonline.com and on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest under Originally Worn. Before we dig right in, let's go over the supplies and tools that you're going to need to accomplish this look. I'll be using all Annie Sloan products. The reason being is that she actually invented chalk paint over 30 years ago, and so since she's the original paint and what I think is one of the best brands out there, it's the only one I can truly speak about. It's the one I use all the time, the one I sell in my store, and it's the one I love. I'm sure there are other decent brands out there, and I know there are some certainly crappy ones out there, but for this video purposes, we're just sticking with Annie Sloan. So the first thing you're gonna need is some paint. We're gonna be painting our little table in Annie Sloan Duck Egg Blue. You can see the color right there. It's a really great kind of vintage blue-green. This is the liter size. Her paints come in a liter and 120 milliliter. Usually if you think you're going to do any more than just a teeny little accent or a little really small table, it's worth your money to get the big one. The stuff lasts a long, long time, and I haven't thrown one away yet in 5 years, so you just get the big one when you can. It's way worth your money. Next, you're gonna need something to paint with. These are an Annie Sloan round bristle paintbrush. This is actually the medium size, but it comes in small, medium, and large. Now, this one has been used a long time. They're actually probably about this much longer. They come with a little hole in the end there, but you know, he's had a rough life. They're made in Italy, they're natural bristle, and you see their shape? It's very kind of funky and cool, and it really lends itself to an antiquing kind of look. Not that it's filled with brush strokes or anything like that, it just gives a good texture to it, and it's cool. But if that's not your thing, they also make a flat synthetic bristle brush that's also from Italy. Less expensive than the round bristle brushes. I still like to have these when I start painting because like in crevices and grooves, it's really hard to get that round bristle in there. But this, you know, works really well to get into those flat areas. You may also need a couple tools, like a screwdriver to take handles off, maybe some wood glue to repair something, painter's tape if you need to tape any areas off. And you will certainly need a paint stir stick and a paint opener. If you choose to distress your piece, you're going to need one of two things. Either an old rag that we're gonna get wet, and that's actually the method I will show you in this video, but I'll also teach you how to do it with a sanding block. You do not need an electric sander. This paint would melt off in a second if you put an electric sander to it. And the last things you're gonna need is a top coat. In Annie Sloan world, it is typically clear wax. You're gonna always need to put something over your Annie Sloan chalk paint unless it's exterior. But typically you start with clear wax and then you can build from there. They make wax brushes. This is my large one. I love it, but it took me a couple years to get used to using something like this. It typically has a big point on it, but I have done many kitchens in this. And then I use two different ones when I use a dark wax, which is like brown, or they actually have black wax, which is black. I use this poor sad little nubby guy, which again, he starts with a point that's out like there. Or I use a chip brush. And the reason being, all I'm doing is like a little groove. I use this brush to get it in there. And if I'm doing all over dark wax, I use this big guy. This is the end table we're gonna be working on today. It's a long, skinny, solid oak table. It is actually in great condition and it's very heavy and wonderful, but it just is outdated. You do not need to sand your piece when you're using a high quality chalk paint like Annie Sloan paint. You can if you need to fix like a blemish or take care of an area or a repair, but you do not need to for the adhesion purposes of the paint. But you do need to clean your piece well. Any kind of like oil and grease and hand stuff and like wood cleaners like Pledge can wreak havoc on your paint sticking well. To do that, I mix a couple drops of dish soap, about a 1/4 cup of vinegar, and 1/2 gallon of hot water together, and I wipe it all down, and then I wipe it down with clean water, clean hot water. I've already done that here, and it's just drying right now. The first thing you would want to do is then take any parts off that you need to like tape off. Let's say we weren't gonna paint the top of this, I would need to tape it off. We're gonna need to take this drawer out, and I'm going to take the handle off, which you just need a little screwdriver, or in this case, I can just spin it off with my hand here. And I'm just gonna either paint this or replace it with another one. Not even sure yet, but I'm not changing the whole configuration. If you're gonna do that, try to do that before you paint. You'd have to fill your old hole and then, you know, would get the nicest paint job done. So here is the drawer then, and I'm actually gonna just tape around these sides. For this piece, that's all the prep that we really needed. Some would require more than others. Also, something small like this, or certainly a chair, start with it upside down. This one we're actually not painting the underneath. It's kind of a hollow drawer area, and I can get to all these edges, and this is already unfinished. So we're just gonna leave it this direction for now, but like I said, I have my Annie Sloan Duck Egg Blue here, and a can opener. The lids on the newer paints, depending on when you are watching this video, they're kind of hard, so just make sure you go around the lid, and they collect a lot of paint up in the lid. So I'm gonna scoop off some of the excess here. And then you can certainly decant your paint into another container if you like. Mason jars tend to work really well. Easy squeeze bottles do sometimes too. And then you're gonna need to stir this. Unstir it pretty good. Annie Sloan paint doesn't separate like the same as a typical latex paint would that you would buy to paint your walls, but there still really does need to be a good stir involved to it. And typically when I paint, I then dump some in like a plastic throwaway container, like a cottage cheese kind of container we have left over. Especially if you're gonna mix water in it. If you've never used a high quality chalk paint before, then you don't know. I mean, this is thick, like in between a consistency of pudding and creamer, I guess. It's thick, and if you've never done it, it can be a little weird to get used to. If you choose to mix water with it, which you can, but you need to mix it in a separate container other than your quart, and you need to stir it really well. That will give you a smoother texture when painting, but it will also take your coverage down, so you might need to do an extra coat. Now, because we're working here, then I'm just going to paint right out of this container. Although again, like I said, I wouldn't recommend it, but I go through this stuff pretty fast. So I'm gonna be using my medium round Annie Sloan natural bristle brush, and just gonna get some paint on the edges there. You don't need to like totally goob in a ton. Let's see how much paint I have on there. And then I'm gonna start, I guess right here. And I'm just gonna start putting it everywhere. See how I can kind of smooth it out and work it around? And these brushes, why they're so amazing. So like, let's say for this leg right here, you just kind of go like that, and it gets in all of these little detail grooves without any trouble. So I'm gonna go around and paint one layer on everything. Everything has been painted and I've let it dry. It took about 20 minutes to let it dry. Now you can see here how one coat doesn't have complete full coverage, but I'm actually not going to do a second coat because I'm going to embrace that look. But feel free to do a second coat if you want a more solid coverage. Whether you decide to put 1 or 2 coats of paint on is up to you. But then the next step is also up to you. It's distressing. You certainly do not have to do any of this distressing, but anti-Sloan paint and chalk paint lends itself really wonderful to this kind of antiqued look. So there's 2 methods that I use to do any sort of distressing. I have a wet rag I'm going to show you. You'd use this method. It's actually called wet distressing. When you want to preserve the finish that's underneath this. So like, let's say I had a really beautiful dark walnut under here that I didn't want to get marred at all, then I'm going to use this wet rag. Also wonderful when all you want to do is highlight your edges of distressing and you're not going to distress all over. Otherwise, use a sanding block. This will cut through everything a little bit faster than a wet rag will, but it's going to make a dust mess because this stuff is chalky before it's waxed. I will show you both on this piece. Another thing to think about when distressing is that you don't just want to all of a sudden come in here and just start sanding and get these like little things. We call them cheetah spots, and it looks very unnatural and very crafty. It's not good. Not to say that you can't have an all over distressed look, but then you need to make sure your edges are distressed really well, and you need to kind of go in from there. So what I suggest to do to distress is the most natural way is to think about if this piece had been used at home for the last 50 years, where would it have naturally come off? Well, all of the hard edges it would have come off of, you know, around maybe like the points right here along this bottom here. This, you know, most likely wouldn't have got really that distressed. This down here might not have. Now, again, you can really go in and do that, but make sure then all your edges are really distressed well. I'm gonna start on the drawer front so you can see it up close. So we're gonna take the rag and again do the wet distress. The paint is dry, the rag is wet. So see how it has this little ledge right here? I'm gonna take my finger, kind of wrap it around that rag, and then just push ever so slightly on that edge, and you see right there, no mess, no fuss, perfect kind of edge distress. And don't feel like you have to do it everywhere. Like I might skip part of that corner and only do like that much right there. And then you can hit like this, get some of that off. Can see in there the little bits. Now let's do the other 2 sides with the sanding block. So you just take your sander, rub it, and see you have the same kind of edge. You have a little bit more control over it with a sanding block than you do with a rag, being that sometimes that rag just wipes that paint right off more than you would have thought, where you can be a little bit more delicate with it. And then I just wiped the dust of the sanding block off. So the top is done there with the block and that side is done with the rag and the bottom. So they actually end up with pretty much the same kind of results. It's more of what you're comfortable with and what you want with the finish underneath, if that makes a difference for you. So I'm gonna go along and distress all of it. A couple final notes to add on distressing. If when you're wet distressing or using your sanding block and it gets away from you, don't be scared. If you hate it, you can always add another layer of paint on it. You can see I got quite a bit off of that edge right there. I'm okay with it though, because I like distressed furniture. Another thing to add, the fresher your paint is, the easier it will come off with wet distressing. Even though anti-slone paint does need a top coat, it still cures up hard on its own the longer it sits. So if you're gonna try to come back and sand and distress something 2 months from now, it's gonna be hard. You're gonna hurt your elbow. This just, of course, it's been dry for like 3 minutes. So it wiped off really easily. Also because there was only 1 coat of paint on there. The more paint you have to work through, the harder it's gonna be. Also, if you're working on a bigger piece, your rag is gonna get filled with paint when you're wet distressing. Just keep a bucket and wring it out and rinse it and keep it going. Now we're gonna talk about sealing your piece or protecting the paint job that you've worked hard for. There are a lot of options for sealing your piece in the anti-slone line. There is anti-slone clear wax, and there's also an anti-slone lacquer. It comes in matte and glossy. So if you want a really glossy thing, use the anti-slone glossy lacquer. Or if you have something that gets a ton of wear and tear, like a tabletop, the anti-slone matte lacquer is perfect for that. But I will tell you, all the cabinets in my home, the end tables, everything like that, with 2 little boys in our house, is all done with the anti-slone clear wax as the top coat, and it has withstood our lives beautifully. So the clear wax definitely isn't delicate, nor do you need to reapply it year after year. In the 5 years that I have done this, I have never reapplied wax like it dissipates or something. It's the weirdest rumor ever, but you don't need to do that ever. So don't worry about that. Wax is a wonderful top coat. It's just more of a European top coat, but it's super duper easy. I will have videos on the lacquer. You cannot wax outside, so know that too, I guess, but that's when you use the lacquer. And I've done some of those tutorials too. But wax is gonna be your simplest, easiest way. But good quality wax is what's needed. Again, I only use anti-slone clear wax, and it's like the consistency of Crisco. You should be able to mush it around. You shouldn't need to push it out on a plate first or anything like that. Sometimes I scoop some out and work it on a plate, but most of the time I'm just going in there and go crazy. Here's my large anti-slone wax brush. You can see that it is not filled with wax. It's got a little bit on there. You do not need a ton. 2 thin coats is better than 1 thick coat unless you really know what you're doing. So you put a little bit of wax on there. I put a little bit more, and you just kind of start. And I will show you a closer up on the drawer here. And if your paint is fresh, like this one is, you can rub more of it off if you push too hard waxing, which in my case isn't a big deal, but if that is gonna be, you know, an issue for you, just know that you might need to let your paint cure a little bit harder overnight. So you wanna work in smaller sections. Think of like a dresser drawer front. I'm gonna work on the side panel of this. And again, I'll show you on the drawer front here in a second, but you'll be able to see where the wax is and isn't. So I'm gonna do just that far because that's what I can reach right here. And then I'm gonna take a lint-free rag. Right now I have this old rag here. Blue shop towels work great too. And I'm just gonna give it a couple, 1, 2, 3, let's see, 4 quick wipes. Reason being is if you just wipe the crap out of this, it's gonna cause high and low spots. There's gonna be shiny spots and dull spots. If you can wipe it so it's not super greasy and gooby, which helps if you don't put too much on to start, which helps with a wax brush, then you don't have to wipe that much. And when I let this be and I leave it alone, it will be matte and beautiful when it kind of cures up in a couple days. Here's our drawer front, and I'm gonna try to do this as close up as possible so you can really see how the wax looks when you're going on. Harder to see on a white, kind of a black and dark navy blue. Take a whole other method that I have videos on also. So I got, see, you know, some wax on my wax brush there. I'm gonna try to kind of spread it on. And can you see where you can see where it is hit? I'm trying to see the kind of shadow right there, the shade difference. See if I can get a little bit more for you. I'll go around the edges and you might be able to tell then. It doesn't change the color, it kind of almost enriches the color. Okay, so you can see kind of around those edges where I've waxed. A color like this really shows that great because you can see if you've missed any spots, and if you're very careful about it, I think you only need one good coat of wax. But if you're fast or you don't, it's a color it's hard to see, or you're not being careful, just give it 2 light coats. It's not gonna hurt anything. You can see here, and I do like to kind of work it around the piece and get the excess out of the grooves but into my brush. So you can see there, I've waxed the drawer front. Now I'm taking my lint-free cloth and I'm just gonna give it a couple quick wipes to get the extreme excess off. And I'm gonna get it out of any edges. And sometimes you have to like kind of stick your fingernail in there, stuff like that, but that was all it took. See, I can't really see here. I'm applying very little pressure when I'm doing that. And there is an evenly waxed drawer front. Here, if it hits the light right, you can kind of see where the wax has still got its streaks. But it will cure then to a beautiful kind of, I'd say, I mean, I call it a matte finish. It's definitely not shiny, but it is not dull, and I love it. Now you could certainly stop here. It's all clear wax. If you decide to stop here, be sure to let your wax cure for technically 21 days till you set stuff on top of it. I found that if you give it like a couple days, maybe 2, it's really easy to handle. It doesn't have any issues with stuff on top of it. But the best part of wax is if something does happen to it, let's say you scratch it all the way down to the surface. Well, you can just hit it up with some more anti-slum paint right there and then more wax. But let's just say you put a lamp on it too early and the wax hasn't cured yet. Just take that lamp back off, rub a little bit more clear wax into it, and it's finished. I've had some side tables that the kids have done a number on in some areas, and all if I ever needed to do was hit a little spot with clear wax and it looked brand new again. But since we're here for learning, let's go on to talk about dark wax. So anti-Sloan wax comes in clear, white, dark, and black. Dark is actually brown, and it's what's best used for antiquing. It's like shoe polish. So there's a couple ways that you can dark wax, but also good to have on hand here is a separate wax brush. You don't want to mix your clear wax and your dark wax brushes. It'll cause problems on your next thing. If you don't want to afford a second high quality wax brush, get a chip brush here. So the reason why a chip brush works is that you can get a little bit on there, and again, I'll show you on the drawer close up, but you can take it and you can kind of put it in these crevices and kind of zhuzh it around. Now this doesn't work if you're gonna do an all over dark wax, which we may. Today I don't really know on this piece yet. And then you take a lint-free cloth and just kind of wipe the excess back off. Now my clear wax is really fresh because I just did it, so it wiped off really easily. But let's say it's been 2 months since you've clear waxed it. You might need to also keep your clear wax handy, because by adding more clear wax, it will help kind of smooth and work around your dark wax. If that doesn't work, like if for some reason your piece of furniture is super dry, or just, I don't know, the paint just really wants to take that, maybe you didn't put a good enough coat of clear wax on. If you use mineral spirits, pure natural mineral spirits, you can use that to kind of wipe the dark wax and mush it around, and it will reactivate it, because that's what wax is made out of, and really help you do that. There's also a technique called glazing, which I have a video on that I'll share the link for. But let's go to the drawer so I can show you a little bit closer up. So once again, here we have our drawer, and you see the edge there? See if I can put a little bit of dark wax down in that. Now the less you're able to put on, kind of the less you have to work to wipe it back off. So if you can kind of push this around and almost think of it as paint instead of thinking it as a covering that you then need to like goob all the way off, don't. So there it is in there, and I'm gonna take my rag, and like I said, this is more of a just a decorative kind of thing. I think that rag might have had mineral spirits on it. Here, we'll move to the next top up here. I'll get a new rag. So there is another area of my dark wax, and I'll just wipe it off there. So now you can actually see that other rag did actually have mineral spirits on it, and see how much it took back off, and see how this is kind of left a brown haze all over it. That's actually more what I'm going for. I just grabbed the wrong one. So I'm gonna put it in this edge here, and yes, I kind of have a bunch on this brush, so I might as well just go for it. And then I'm gonna take my rag here and wipe it back off. Now you are gonna see how you can see the streaks, you know, just be aware of how you're wiping. You don't wanna make these big swirls of brown. Think of it again, more like you're painting brown on there. But really, I think technically it's called antiquing. So here I'm gonna go with a little bit more of a drier brush, less wax on it. See how that kind of worked? And then I'm gonna go back in, wipe the edges, and kind of buff some of that out. So here you can see, now if you step back, how this side kind of has less than this. It's just part of the actual art of painting furniture. So you can kind of go back in. You could have taken more of that off, say you didn't like that, with either, again, the clear wax or mineral spirits, or just a little bit better wiping. I like a lot of dark wax, because I like a lot of old stuff. And I'm gonna just do a lightly, as long as it's not super gooby and super tacky, you don't have to wipe this off quite as much. And also, it is wax just the same as clear wax is, it just has pigment in it. So if you are super creative, you can skip the clear waxes in certain artful instances. Don't do it normally unless you know what you're doing. But there you go. So I'm gonna do that to the rest of it and show you that. Here's a great example of a place where you would need the large Annie Sloan wax brush. Doing something in a big area. Again, you're just doing the crevices, the little chip brush will work great. But if you want to cover a whole area and you want it all the way, you won't be able to do it with anything faster than with this Annie Sloan wax brush. And I am, you know, very deliberately doing it in long linear strokes here, or at least trying to, and not be in the camera so much for you. So then I'm gonna take my old rag and I'm gonna try to work faster because I don't want it to totally goob up on me. Sorry for the shaking there. Put a little bit more elbow grease into dark wax than you do clear wax, till you get the look you like. And then again, just be deliberate for where it goes. Now, if this is too much for you and you don't like it, just take clear wax, add a little bit to your rag, and it'll help loosen all this back up. Or, again, if all crap goes loose, then just take mineral spirits. That'll help perfect. Hopefully you can see that well in there. That should be good. So here you have the finished table. I replaced the knob with a knob I got at Hobby Lobby there. And you can see then I've made it antiqued and distressed it with the Annie Sloan Duck Egg Blue and the Annie Sloan Clear Wax and Dark Wax. You can find these products right now, as of this video, online on my website at originallywornonline.com, or you can find your own local Annie Sloan stockist at anniesloan.com. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the notifications icon. That way you'll know every time that I come out with a brand new tutorial. Also be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and remember you can find us online under originallywornonline.com and on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest under Originally Worn. Happy painting!